Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Leng. Snapper Point is an Australian conservation area situated near Fraser Park Beach, close to Catherine Hill Bay, New South Wales. The area surrounding Cape Snapper Point draws adventurous tourists who climb it in search of remarkable photographs, as it comprises entirely of steep, irregular volcanic rocks. On April 24, 2016, at 10:30 a.m., a group of hikers walking at the foot of the promontory noticed a large object floating on the surface of the water. They reported the discovery to law enforcement, and the police arrived at the scene and removed an unidentified package. After examining the findings on shore, they discovered the body of an unknown woman with multiple injuries, suggesting that the victim had been subjected to a brutal assault. She was not identified, but news reports described her as an Asian female between 20 and 30 years old, of average height. 5 years earlier, a major airport in the northern Sichuan province of the People's Republic of China saw off 20-year-old Leng during a torrential downpour. The girl tearfully said goodbye to her beloved mother after the death of her father in 2008. Her mother became the closest person to her. Leng flew from her native China to the distant country of Australia, where she had dreamed of studying since her childhood. 11 hours later, the plane landed in Sydney. It was the first time Leng had made such a long journey alone, but she was determined to achieve her dream, so she easily overcame any difficulties. She was met at the airport by her own aunt and her son, who was only 2 years younger than Leng. The oldest and most populous state in Australia is New South Wales, where 1 in 3 Australians live. It was here that Leng's early years were spent after moving here. Since coming to Australia, Leng has lived happily with her 48-year-old aunt, her young husband, Derek Barrett, and her cousin in their camping house. The girl had a private room where she spent almost all of her free time. Leng loved to read and draw, so she would spend hours in her room pursuing her favorite hobbies. For the convenience of living in another country, Leng changed her name to Michelle. Michelle Leng enrolled at the University of Technology in Sydney, where she successfully studied economics and hospitality management. Michelle was very intelligent and motivated. She was not afraid of anything new and easily made new acquaintances. Like many girls of her age, she often posted photos on social networks, where she drank cocktails with friends, as well as pictures of her extreme adventures to dangerous natural places. Michelle was an adventurous person who could easily travel to Hobart for a vacation and regularly took day trips around New South Wales. In recent weeks, she posted videos from West Head Lookout near Sydney Harbour, photos from Resolute Beach north of the city, from Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park, and from Jervis Bay on the south coast. On June 13, 2013, she visited Snapper Point, where she fearlessly photographed herself on the edge of a cliff and posted this striking photo to her Instagram account. Michelle excelled in her studies, made new friends, and found a part-time job. Desiring to organize her personal life, Michelle communicated regularly with men on dating sites and went on trial dates. The woman led an active and busy life, attending classes during the day and then rushing to work on her weekends. She made sure to meet friends and visit unusual places. On April 21, 2016, Michelle met up with a friend at the mall. They had lunch together, did some shopping, and then Michelle boarded a train at the train station. She got off at Central Station around 4:30 in the afternoon and was never seen again. 2 days later, Derek went to the train station to meet his wife, who had returned from a business trip. Aunt Michelle asked Derek about his niece, and he said he had not seen her in 2 days. Derek Barrett had been unemployed for a long time, so he often stayed up late at the computer and woke up only in the afternoon, so it was obvious that he might not have seen Michelle. But the situation was such that nobody had seen Michelle since April 22nd, and her phone was switched off. Having called all of Michelle's acquaintances and friends, the aunt became even more worried. She inspected the girl's room, but it was in perfect order, as usual. After going through the girl's laptop, the family concluded that Michelle had not returned from her date, and perhaps something had happened to her. Her absence was quite unusual, as she was in regular contact with friends and family members living in China and Australia. The next day, Michelle's aunt and her husband Derek went to the police station and filed a missing persons report. They also reported Michelle Leng's disappearance to the Chinese embassy on April 24, 2016. The body of an unidentified woman, wrapped in a plastic bag, was discovered by a group of tourists at Snapper Point. While Michelle's relatives in China and Australia were searching for her, local news channels reported the finding of the woman's body. A compiled sketch of the victim made it clear that it was Michelle. It took the police 3 days to identify her after they made a sketch of her. From that point on, Michelle Leng was officially listed as a missing person, and an investigation was launched. After interviewing Michelle's close relatives who were living with her, the initial theory was that she had been attacked by an unknown person with whom she had planned to meet that day. CCTV footage tracked the girl's movements on the day she went missing, but the surveillance cameras and footage from a short train journey showed that Michelle was alone. According to her friends, she had no plans to meet anyone that day and was in a rush to get home. Reviewing social networks and correspondence of the girl did not confirm the presence of a young man with whom she could have met. The version about a secret stranger who could have committed the crime was not confirmed. The results of the forensic examination confirmed that Michelle's body had sustained multiple injuries, and she had most likely tried to fight off her attacker, resulting in multiple stab wounds. Police Chief Inspector Gary Jubelin said the interpretation of the situation is that Michelle was brutally assaulted before her death, but she was spotted on her way home and did not go out anywhere else, so the perpetrator must have attacked her in that area. The inspector also noted that most likely the perpetrator had deliberately chosen a very secluded area of such a beautiful place, as the body was found in an area frequented by tourists and fishermen, but the place was somewhat isolated. Forensic analysis indicated that Michelle Leng's body had been in the water for no more than 48 hours, and likely much less, suggesting the body had been dumped quite recently. The Chief Inspector of Police stated that although the location where the body was found was distant from the national park entrance, there was a parking lot near the tourist attraction, implying the body may have been transported there by car. Homicide detectives studied CCTV and traffic camera footage to determine Michelle Leng's last known movements. They continued to contact her family members, friends, and co-workers to gather additional information. In addition to the search efforts, interviews were conducted with relatives and acquaintances in the hope of reconstructing a detailed picture of the event and establishing a full understanding of the relationships within the family where Michelle lived. Police Inspector Gary Jubelin stated with certainty that based on the gathered information, Michelle was a very responsible person who always kept in touch with her family and informed them of her whereabouts. Therefore, there were serious concerns when she suddenly disappeared. However, for 2 days, her family either did not notice she was missing or chose to ignore it. Police called Derek Barrett in for questioning as the last person to see Michelle alive. Investigators were skeptical of his accounts of nightlife and long daytime naps, so he was re-interviewed. The investigators began asking questions about his relationship with Michelle and asked him to remember the last time he had seen her. Unable to withstand the pressure of the interrogation, Derek refused to answer the question and demanded a lawyer. Such strange and uncertain behavior led to a number of doubts, and Derek was arrested as a suspect. However, the arrest had grounds, as on the eve of the interrogation, investigators checked his cell phone signal and found that he was in the same area where Michelle's body was found on April 24th. Additionally, when police obtained surveillance footage from a parking lot, It captured a car matching the description of Derek Barrett's vehicle in the early morning hours of April 24th, leaving no doubt that he was there. Derek denied and claimed to the last that it was just a coincidence and the car was not his, but the footage was clear enough to prove his presence in the parking lot. Police have charged a 27-year-old man in the death of 25-year-old Michelle Leng. Her naked body, with multiple stab wounds, was found in a blowhole on the Central Coast, New South Wales. The news of the arrest and charge against Derek has left Michelle's entire family in shock. Police spoke to Michelle's mother, who was devastated by the news of her daughter's death. She rushed to Sydney to see the site of her only daughter's dream and death, but the woman was still unable to comprehend her daughter's passing. Derek Barrett, age 27, who was married to Michelle Leng's aunt, was charged with the 25-year-old student's murder. This occurred after the police released CCTV footage that captured her last shopping trip in the central business district of Sydney on April 21st, as well as her journey back home. The footage shows her shopping at a mall on Pitt Street before boarding a train at St. James Station to travel to Erskine Park, located in the southwest of Sydney. The police believe that Michelle returned to her family home in Erskine Park in the afternoon, where she lived with her uncle, aunt, and cousin, and was presumably murdered there. The autopsy revealed that Michelle tried to fight off her attacker and was stabbed several times in defense, stabbing her more than 30 times in total. CCTV footage is believed to have captured a vehicle entering Lake Munmora National Park at around 7 a.m. on April 24th, and police claim Michelle Leng's body was inside the vehicle. Despite Derek Barrett being detained and charged, the investigation continued, and gradually other details of Michelle Leng's final moments surfaced. Based on these, further charges were laid, including 5 counts of indecent assault, 2 counts of installing a hidden camera, and murder. The investigation revealed that the suspect had an abnormal sexual interest in his wife's young niece. When Derek Barrett's cell phone was seized and handed over to experts for analysis and recovery of previously deleted data, the files found on the phone left no doubt that he was not only involved in Michelle's death, but also had an unhealthy interest in her. It turned out that Derek had installed a hidden camera in the shared bathroom, hidden behind toiletry items, and regularly reviewed the recordings. The phone also contained images taken just before Michelle's death. Following these images, it became clear that Michelle had returned home on April 21st around 5 p.m., and around midnight, she sent her last text message from her phone, after which she could not be contacted. Late at night, Derek Barrett began to execute his malicious plan. He entered Michelle's room again while she was asleep to carry out his customary pattern of assault and gratification, but the girl woke up and Derek attacked her. He bound her and covered her mouth with duct tape to keep her silent. The deviant kept her tied to the bed for 2 days and intermittently abused her, as evident from the photographs on his phone. Investigators found Michelle bound, naked, and with a look of horror on her face, lying on the bed. However, in these photos, Michelle did not yet have the injuries that led to her death. Derek's last picture of her was taken around 8 a.m. on April 23rd, and at that time, Michelle was still alive. During the day of April 23rd, Derek's stepson Derek came home twice and did not hear any sounds from Michelle. Derek was taking a shower at the time. Surveillance cameras showed that Derek left the apartment 4 times to take out the trash. Presumably by this time, Michelle was already dead. Derek had showered and washed off any traces of blood, and then thoroughly cleaned the house, hiding evidence of the crime and Michelle's disappearance. On April 24th at 7 a.m., Derek drove to Snapper Point. On the way, he stopped at a gas station where he bought drinks and filled his car with gasoline. That's where he was caught on CCTV cameras. Upon arriving at Snapper Point, he disposed of Michelle's body and took some pictures around 9 a.m. Afterwards, Derek visited his parents, who noticed nothing unusual in his behavior and then returned home to await his wife's return with absolute equanimity. He repeatedly claimed that he had not seen Michelle and that the girl had not returned home, and cynically accompanied his wife to the police station to file a missing persons report. On June 29, 2016, the first court hearing was held. Barrett's lawyer, Bill Whitby, told the local court that Barrett was pleading not guilty and that he was as shocked and upset by Michelle's death as the rest of the family. Michelle Leng's friends and family were present in the packed courtroom, but Derek Barrett did not need to attend in person. He appeared later via video link. The fact is that the day before, the defendant reported that he did not remember much in the hours before he killed Michelle Leng because he had taken illegal drugs. He also told the court that he had only vague memories of the 2-hour trip to Snapper Point, where he threw Michelle Leng's body off the cliff. Before attending the court hearing, Derek Barrett was examined by a psychologist. However, forensic psychologist Dr. Richard First disputed the defendant's claims of memory loss. He testified and found Derek Barrett mentally fit to be punished to the full extent of his sentence. Dr. First testified that the drugs the suspect was taking did not cause memory loss, and that all of his actions, from the murder to the disposal of the body, were clear and purposeful. Respected forensic psychiatrist Dr. Richard First also stated that Derek Barrett's intelligence, concentration, and memory were within the normal range. He did not believe Barrett's claims of memory loss and said the number of stab wounds indicated sadistic tendencies rather than memory lapses or acting on emotions. The psychologist also rejected Derek Barrett's claim that he did not feel sexually attracted to the victim. Dr. Richard First also told the court that the accused feigned amnesia to reduce his responsibility for the crime, after he claimed he could not remember the period when he apprehended and killed Michelle Leng. Speaking at the trial, Derek Barrett attempted to justify his crime by claiming he was addicted to illegal drugs. However, this assertion was refuted by Dr. Richard First, who pointed out that Derek's claim was self-contradictory, as it was evident that the suspect had gained weight during that time period. Judge Wilson stated that in his 30-year career as a criminal defense attorney, he had never encountered an obese, substance-dependent individual. Regrettably, there was nothing genuine about Derek Barrett's behavior in the courtroom. In Sydney, Derek Barrett's demeanor in court gave the impression of a psychopath. His crime was not the result of a drunken night, poor life choices, or childhood abuse. In August, at a retrial hearing, Derek Barrett pleaded guilty to murdering and kidnapping Michelle Leng, as well as twice sneaking into her room while she slept and making videos. He also admitted taking 19 explicit photos of Michelle Leng shortly before her death. Barrett said he could not remember the 48-hour period during which he killed the girl, including cleaning up the crime scene and dumping her body, because he was under the influence of illegal substances. He said his only memories were of an argument, blood in the bathroom, and the terrified face of his niece screaming at him. However, Judge Wilson said she did not believe Derek Barrett was telling the truth about his memory loss, nor did she believe he was truly sorry for what he had done. The Leng family consoled each other while Derek Barrett wiped away tears, telling them, "I deserve to live. This should never have happened." Passing sentence, Judge Helen Wilson condemned Derek Barrett's actions as depraved and sadistic, committed by a person in a position of trust. The judge detailed Barrett's disturbing fantasies and actions in court, making it clear that he had failed to fool anyone. Although the events were deeply etched in his mind, Barrett claimed they were merely vague memories. During the court sessions, Barrett showed no emotion and repeatedly spoke the victim's name. Chief Inspector Gary Jubilin of the NSW Police Homicide Unit stated that the crime was horrific and senseless, and while justice was served, there was no joy in such a case. Judge Wilson sentenced 28-year-old Barrett to 34 years and 6 months in prison, with a maximum term of 46 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2050. Barrett displayed no emotional reaction when sentenced. Michelle's mother, Mrs. Zhang, expressed gratitude to the Australian and Chinese communities for their support during her time of immense grief. She also thanked the NSWAT police, including Detective Inspector Jubilin, for their investigation into her daughter's death. A fund has been established to cover the costs of Miss Leng's funeral and to provide support for her mother when she returns to China. However, Michelle Leng's tragic story did not end there. 4 years after the crime, an unexpected event occurred. A woman visiting her elderly, dementia-affected mother found an unknown USB device in the mother's hands. Upon examination, the device contained disturbing videos and photos of Michelle Leng's abuse shortly before her murder. The police were able to match the photos to those that Derek Barrett had deleted from his phone in an attempt to conceal his crimes. In 2020, Barrett was charged with additional sex offenses based on this new evidence. Prosecutor Hugh Baker told the court that the elderly woman had no connection to Barrett, and there was no explanation for how the USB drive ended up in her possession. The horrifying and depraved secret, discovered by chance, led to Barrett receiving additional years of punishment to his already lengthy sentence. Friends and acquaintances commemorated Michelle Leng on Chinese and Australian social media. This tragic story underscores the need to address the underlying factors that can contribute to such crimes, such as idleness, lack of purpose, and indifference. Cherishing life and being mindful of each day is crucial, as we can never predict which day will be our last. In the summer of 2003, the body of 36-year-old Sabrina Payne was found in a field near Tremont, Illinois. Sabrina was a black female who was known to support a drug habit with prostitution. Sabrina had last been seen at her home 2 days before her body was found. The original autopsy failed to determine a cause of death, leaving some of the detectives to believe she had overdosed. One detective, however, felt uneasy about that assumption. His suspicions were confirmed as more bodies were found in Peoria and Tazewell counties over the next year. On February 5, 2004, the body of 36-year-old Barbara Williams was found in a ditch near Edwards, Illinois. She was found partially clothed and lying face down in the snow. She had been seen alive between 9 and 10 p.m. the night before. An autopsy showed that she had multiple contusions and abrasions on her body. Toxicology showed that she had fatal levels of cocaine in her blood. At this point, police were not ready to call this a murder or entertain the idea of a serial killer preying on black drug-addicted prostitutes. In October of 2004, 32-year-old Shakanda Thomas was reported missing. She had last been seen by her family in August. Shakanda was known to disappear at times, but when she didn't come back after several weeks, her family reported her missing. Shirley Ann Trapp was also reported missing in the late summer of 2004. She was seen 3 days before she was reported missing. Tamara Walls was reported missing in September of 2004 after not being seen for 3 weeks. All 3 missing women were also black females known to support a crack cocaine habit with prostitution. 36-year-old mother of 8, Laura Lawler, disappeared from her home after leaving with a man and woman. Her longtime partner searched for her but only was able to determine she had been with a man named Larry. Her boyfriend, and father to her 7 daughters and 1 son, describes Laura as the love of his life and a beautiful soul. The two had experimented with crack cocaine, and Laura seemed to struggle with addiction before her disappearance. On September 25, 2004, Linda Neal was found on King Road in Tazewell County. She was found nude along the side of the road. Linda, like the other women, was known to be part of the drug scene in Peoria. At this point, police had determined there was likely a serial killer stalking black females in the Peoria area. A task force was formed, which one detective states would have occurred much quicker if the victims had been white females. While police desperately searched for the killer, they kept a close eye on women in the community at risk. Despite their efforts, on October 15, 2004, Brenda Irving's body was found in a ditch near Farmington. Brenda was found nude, and an autopsy determined that she had been strangled and suffered blunt force trauma to her head. She also had fatal levels of cocaine in her system at the time of her death. Her children had feared for their mother's safety, as she had known many of the women who had been killed or disappeared from central Illinois. Brenda struggled with drug addiction. Despite detectives' best efforts, the case proved difficult to solve. They followed thousands of leads, but finally got the lead they were waiting for in December of 2004. 35-year-old Vicki Boehmer was arrested for theft. From jail, she told authorities that she thought she could help them find the serial killer preying on her fellow sex workers. She believed that a man who had picked her up in July 2004 was responsible. Boehmer explained that in July, a man named Larry Bright lured her to his mother's home where they shared alcohol and drugs. Once she was intoxicated, she said Bright attacked her, attempted to rape her, and pulled a knife on her. Somehow, Boehmer was able to escape. Police were at first skeptical, as Boehmer asked for a plea deal in exchange for her testimony. Why hadn't she reported this back in July? Why wait until she was under arrest? Vicki Boehmer claimed she was scared of being arrested for outstanding warrants, which is why she did not come forward in July 2004. A search of her criminal history confirmed the warrants, so detectives decided to take a look at the man named Larry Bright. Larry Dean Bright was born in Peoria, Illinois, on July 8, 1966. He served a 2-year stint in prison at age 19 for burglary and carjacking. According to Larry's family, the time Larry spent in prison changed him for the worse. Larry became more angry and violent and began using drugs. Larry had an injury, which started an addiction to prescription opioids and later crack cocaine. He also developed an addiction to pornography, preferring videos with black women. Larry lived with his mother in a tiny guest house behind her home. Larry enjoyed gardening, creating a beautiful garden bed of flowers for his mother. When the police arrived at Larry's home following the tip, they noticed the beautiful flowers in the garden. Larry was placed under arrest for the unlawful restraint of Vicki. They questioned Larry about the murders, but he denied having any information about the murdered and missing women. Throughout the interview, Larry smoked several cigarettes. Detectives planned to take one of the cigarette butts and test it for DNA, but Larry ate them before leaving the interrogation room. Larry declined to give DNA voluntarily. Police searched Larry Bright's home on January 20, 2005. The investigators dug up the garden, finding several small bone fragments and ashes that were later determined to be human. When the police questioned Larry again, they told him they were digging up his mother's flowers. At this point, Larry broke down and confessed to multiple murders. He even led investigators to the remains of some of his victims. Larry explained that around July 27, 2003, he picked up Sabrina Payne on the south side of Peoria. He drove her to his home, which he shared with his mother. He claimed the two drank and used cocaine before having consensual sex. Larry said he did not intend to kill Sabrina, but he became enraged, thinking Sabrina was trying to rip him off. He strangled her to death and dumped her body near the cornfield where she was found. Larry confessed to picking up Barbara Williams in February 2004. Again, he used drugs and alcohol with his victim. He stated that he once again lost control of his anger and killed Barbara. He claimed he caught Barbara stealing from him. He dumped her body along the road, where she was found the next day. The prosecution believed that after the first two murders, Larry developed a bloodlust. At the time of his arrest, he said, "I knew them I would kill the others I would pick up. I went out hunting." Larry also confessed to killing Laura Lauer. He burned her body in his backyard burn pit, burying the remains in his mother's yard. He said he wanted to destroy the bodies to avoid getting caught. He confessed to killing Tamara Walls and burning her remains. Her jawbone was found in the backyard. He admitted to strangling, beating, and burning Shirley in trap. Shakanda Thomas had the same fate after being picked up by Larry Bright. He burned the woman and buried the ashes in the yard. Because of his attempts to cremate his victims, he was nicknamed the Bone Crusher. Larry said that he attempted to burn Linda Neal and Brenna Irving as well, but the attempts were unsuccessful due to the weather. He dumped both women along the side of the road. Larry was facing the death penalty following his January 2005 arrest. In an attempt to spare his mother the embarrassment of a trial and avoid the death penalty, Larry Bright pleaded guilty to 7 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of drug-induced homicide on May 30, 2006. Bright's murders were not considered racially motivated, but detectives believe he was just attracted to black women. He is one of the very few serial killers who chooses victims outside of his race. Larry was sentenced to 7 life sentences without the possibility of parole, to be served concurrently. He was also given an additional 30 years for the drug-induced homicide. As part of the plea deal, Larry will be required to serve 100% of his sentence with no parole consideration. Larry is currently housed at the Shawnee Correctional Center in Vienna, Illinois. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars, but that brings little peace to the families of his victims. The loved ones of Larry's victims want people to know that the women he killed were more than just drug addicts or prostitutes. They were people. They were mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends. The serial killer dentist of St. Louis, Glennon Engelman. Dr. Glennon Engelman was born on February 6, 1927, in St. Louis, Missouri. Dr. Engelman grew up on the south side of the city and felt a deep connection to his neighborhood. After serving in the military, Dr. Engelman used his GI Bill to go to Washington University and become a dentist. He opened his dental office on the south side of St. Louis, serving the community he had always loved. Dr. Engelman, who went by Glenn, was married to a woman named Edna Ruth, but they divorced in 1956. By 1958, both Glenn and Ruth had remarried. Glenn was operating his dental office and appeared to be successfully serving the St. Louis community. On December 17, 1958, citizens in Forest Park noticed a bloodied man stumbling. The man, James Stanley Bullock, soon passed from his injuries. These injuries were caused by a gunshot. No one could figure out why someone would shoot 28-year-old James Bullock. James Bullock was born on April 17, 1931, in DeSoto. He was raised in Shiloh, Illinois, by his grandparents and later his aunt after his parents passed away. According to an article from 1938, the then 7-year-old was living with his grandparents in 1938 and enjoyed attending school and fishing. James later served in the military before returning to St. Louis to work and go to college. Back in St. Louis, James met Edna Ruth, the ex-wife of Dr. Glenn Engelman. The two married, and 6 short months later, James was dead. An employee at a local sanitarium initially claimed James was there 4 days before his murder, asking to be admitted because he feared for his life. His wife and aunt said this was not true, as the three had dinner together on that night. According to his widow and aunt, James was not afraid for his life, and they knew no one who would want him dead. However, Edna Ruth benefited greatly from her husband's death. Ruth had life insurance policies totaling $64,088. While under questioning, Edna Ruth made several weird statements, including telling the police she was married before, but her husband did not know. Who was she married to? Her husband's dentist, Dr. Glenn Engelman. Edna Ruth had lied to James and his family and lied on the marriage application about being married before. Police questioned a local career criminal who was out on parole for an assault at the time of the shooting. They weren't able to tie him to the murder of James, but they did note he lived near Dr. Engelman's office. Dr. Engelman and Edna Ruth both refused to take a polygraph test and denied any involvement in the murder of James Bullock. Dr. Engelman's new wife, Ida, refused to be questioned by the police. A patient provided an alibi for Dr. Engelman. However, another witness said that they tried to find someone at the office around the time and the office was empty. Edna Ruth invested part of the funds she received after becoming a widow into doctor. Been bored being a dentist, so he often ventured into other areas of business. This included buying a trike strip along with a partner, Eric Fry. Dr. Engelman had grown to be close friends with Eric and his wife Sandy. On September 26, 1963, Eric and Dr. Engelman were at the trike strip using dynamite to explode and then fill abandoned cisterns on the property. Eric was lying on his stomach near one of the cisterns when the dynamite exploded quicker than anticipated. Eric was killed instantly and found lying in the bottom of the cistern. Coroner H.D. Steinbeck ruled the death accidental. Mr. Frey's wife had an insurance policy on her husband, which she invested part of into Dr. Engelman's practice. Dr. Engelman divorced Ida and married his third wife, Ruth, in 1967. The couple shared a son, but Ruth hated the close relationship her husband had with a young woman who worked in his office named Carmen Miranda. Dr. Engelman offered to train Carmen to be a dental assistant in his office. Edna felt uncomfortable with the flirting between the doctor and his young assistant. Dr. Engelman, however, claimed he was trying to help people in his community. He hired Carmen's brother, Nick, as well at one point. Ruth was relieved when Carmen met a married man named Peter Holm. Just a few months later, however, Carmen and Eric were walking in a rural area in Pacific, Missouri. The couple were exploring an area known to have caves and scenic paths. A shot suddenly fired, hitting Peter in the head. Peter died instantly, and a hysterically Carmen flagged down the help. Nearby, police found an X on a tree made with tape. The area was familiar to locals as a hunting area, and police believed that the shot was accidental. Police believe someone was target shooting at the X and accidentally struck Mr. Holm. Carmen had a significant amount of life insurance on her husband, totaling $60,000. This is equivalent to around $300,000 in 2024. Dr. Engelman and Ruth divorced soon after, at which time Dr. Engelman married young Carmen, whom he had known since she was a small child. His son lived with Edna, his ex-wife. Despite being married to Carmen, Dr. Engelman and Ruth still met regularly for sex. Dr. Engelman constantly had extramarital affairs, which included previous affairs with Carmen, Ruth, and even Sandy Fry, the wife of his business associate Eric Fry, who was killed by dynamite. Another of Dr. Engelman's affairs was with a patient named Barbara Boyle. On November 3, 1977, someone pretending to be from the farm girl walked up to the farmhouse owned by Arthur and Vernita Guswell in Edwardsville, Illinois. Soon after entering the home, the elderly couple were attacked and both were shot in the head. The wealthy couple left $340,000 to their son, Ronald Guswell. Guess who Ronald Guswell was married to? Barbara Boyle. On April 4, 1979, less than 2 years after the murder of his parents, Ronald Guswell was found dead inside his car outside a hotel in East St. Louis, Illinois. The man had been beaten and shot to death. He had been missing for 4 days when his body was found. Following her husband's murder, Barbara collected his inheritance in addition to several life insurance policies. The equivalent sum of money today would be nearly $1.7 million. Guess who she cut to? Dr. Glenn Engelman. Following the murder of Ronald Guswell, authorities were starting to notice the trend of connected deaths to Dr. Engelman. His patients and community, however, only saw a generous man committed to helping his community and its citizens. Dr. Engelman was not the greatest dentist, however. He often did a sloppy job of making casts for dentures and dental appliances, requiring the work to have to be redone by the dental lab several times. His business was struggling, however, and he soon found himself in debt with the dental lab owned by Sophie Barrera. Sophie Barrera owned a South St. Louis dental laboratory and had grown tired of waiting for Dr. Engelman to pay up by 1980. She filed a lawsuit against the doctor that was set to go to court just a few days after Sophie was murdered. On January 14, 1980, Sophie entered her vehicle in South St. Louis. Shortly after, the vehicle exploded. Police found remnants of a bomb under her charred vehicle. Sophie had told her son before she was in fear of being killed. She believed Dr. Glenn Engelman was dangerous. Dr. Engelman was questioned for 3 hours and then released. Police were certain he was responsible for Sophie's death, but they had to prove it. The public also wondered if the bombing was related to another bombing in the area that was carried out between two mob families fighting for control over St. Louis's labor unions. The evidence indicated, however, that this was not a mob hit. The number one suspect was the man who owed Sophie $15,000. Dr. Engelman had to be stopped, but the police weren't sure how to do it. Detectives soon began having conversations with Dr. Engelman's ex-wife and mother of his son, Ruth. Ruth told police nothing at first, but eventually started to talk. She explained that Dr. Engelman often bragged about killing people. He told her that he had a superpower. He was able to kill without remorse. He had admitted to killing Eric Fry, Peter Holm, and the Guswell family. It was his side hustle, killing for profit. Ruth agreed to help the police, but none of her testimony could be used in court because Dr. Engelman confessed to her while the two were still married. He was protected by spousal privilege. Ruth decided to wear a wire, however, and met up with Dr. Engelman to exchange their son and sometimes just to socialize. They were still having a sexual relationship despite Dr. Engelman's marriage to Carmen. She tried to get Dr. Engelman to confess to her again by asking direct questions. He didn't seem to take the bait at first, and Ruth feared he would kill her next. Ruth suggested police plant a bug in her bedroom and she would invite the dentist over for sex. Dr. Engelman was suspicious, however, and did not say anything that could lead to his arrest. Ruth then met him at a diner wearing a wire, and this time he commented on being homicidally intimate with the widow of one of his victims. He admitted to the murders in great detail, providing just what police needed for an arrest. He explained that he found murder more sexually satisfying than sex. His ex-wife was given a new life in the witness protection program. Carmen, who was no longer married to the dentist, and her brother Nick were brought in for questioning to corroborate the allegations against Dr. Engelman. As possible co-conspirators, they asked for and were granted immunity to testify against the dentist. Carmen told quite the story. She said she was working for the dentist when he suggested she find someone with good benefits to marry. He told her about Eric Fry, whom he said he directed Sandy Fry to marry with all intentions of murdering the insurance proceeds. Soon after she was married, Carmen said Dr. Engelman told her where to go and made sure her husband was shot and killed. He staged it to look like a target shooting accident. Glennon Engelman was finally arrested and charged with murder in 1980. Carmen testified at Dr. Engelman's first trial, for which he was convicted of murdering Peter Hom and given 50 years in prison. The dentist then pled guilty to the murder of Sophie Barrera to avoid the death penalty. Serving a life sentence for that murder in Missouri, Dr. Engelman was back in court by 1985 in Illinois. In 1984, Robert Handy, a convict and acquaintance of Dr. Engelman, admitted to authorities that he had taken part in the murder conspiracy of the Goosewell family. He implicated Dr. Engelman, who had bludgeoned Ronald Goosewell and shot him, as well as Ronald's widow, Barbara Boyle. Dr. Engelman was given 3 life sentences for the Goosewell murders. He also was convicted of federal mail fraud and given a 30-year federal sentence. He is believed to have killed at least 12 people, including conspiring with his first wife to kill her husband, James Bullock, in 1958. Edna Ruth was never charged in the case due to lack of evidence. Barbara Boyle went on trial for the murder of her in-laws, Arthur and Vernita Goosewell, and husband Ronald in 1985. The jury acquitted her of the murders of Arthur and Vernita but convicted her of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Ronald Goosewell. Barbara Boyle was sentenced to 50 years in prison in 1985. She was granted parole in 2009. Dr. Engelman enjoyed his notoriety in Missouri, often comparing himself to legendary outlaw Jesse James. He is believed to have killed at least 12 people, but the actual number is unknown. Unlike other serial killers, Dr. Engelman was inspired, at least in part, by greed. He also seemed to revel in his ability to not feel remorse. Dr. Engelman died of diabetes-related health issues in 1999 at age 72. He was incarcerated in Jefferson City at the time. Today, we'll be exploring one of the most southern states in America, Mississippi. This state is rich in amazing places, such as the Vicksburg National Military Park, a Civil War battle site, Biloxi Beach, a perfect spot for coastal relaxation. Animal lovers will definitely appreciate the Marine Mammal Studies Institute. History and architecture enthusiasts will be captivated by the town of Melrose, which boasts many stunningly beautiful homes. And undoubtedly, the Biloxi Lighthouse is an excellent place for photography. But the brightest star of the state is, of course, the renowned University of Mississippi, commonly known as Ole Miss, where our story unfolds. During the summer, when academic activities on the university campus come to an end, it becomes especially quiet. The few students who remain over the summer attend extra lectures during the day or prepare on their own for the next academic year, and in the evening, they invariably visit local bars and nightclubs. Among these students was Ellie Kostiel. She was an upperclassman and stayed on campus over the summer to improve her knowledge in certain subjects. Recently, she passed an important exam for her class, Introduction to Retail, at summer school, and was planning to celebrate this with her friends. A small bar with pizza and daiquiris on Oxford Square is particularly popular among the youth, so it's always filled with people and resembles an eternal party. The dim light, loud music, and a rainbow selection of various drinks make it a place where bartenders know many of the customers by name. On the evening of July 19th, Ellie Costiel met up with friends at this bar. They talked and had fun, but Ellie seemed tense and spent the whole evening messaging someone on her phone. Then she had a couple of cocktails and discreetly left. This was one of the last places where Ole Miss student Ellie Costiel was seen in public. On July 20th, 2019, around 10:30 a.m. during their routine patrol, police officers discovered the body of a young woman. It was found near an abandoned fishing camp by Sardis Lake, approximately 30 miles from the university. At the scene, the victim was found with 9 gunshot wounds to her back. Investigators collected 11 shell casings at the scene. A purse containing a driver's license and a student ID belonging to 21-year-old Alexandria Costiel, a University of Mississippi student, was found nearby on the roadside. Alexandria Costiel, affectionately known by friends and family as Ellie, was born on September 11, 1997, in St. Louis, Missouri. A blonde-haired little girl, she grew up surrounded by the care and love of her mother, Cindy, and father, Keith. Her parents supported all her endeavors in learning new things. Ellie excelled academically and in sports, participating in track and field and golf. She loved adventures and traveling, but her dream was to attend the University of Mississippi. This special place, with its traditions and new student life, was her dream destination. Her dream came true, and she became a student at the legendary Ole Miss. Ellie lived in a dormitory in Oxford, Mississippi, and was popular among her peers. Friends and relatives praised Ellie, describing her as a lively and energetic person who greeted everyone with a smile. The tragic loss was a shock to the close-knit community of the lovely girl and her fellow students at the University of Mississippi, as investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the facts. Ellie's father confirmed the tragic news of her death in a Facebook post on Sunday. Yesterday, on Saturday afternoon, the Sunset Hills, Missouri, police visited us and informed us that our beautiful dear Alexandria, our sweet Ellie, was the victim of a crime, wrote Keith Costiel. She was attending summer school and taught fitness at the University of Mississippi in Oxford, Mississippi. She graduated from Lindbergh High School in 2016. She was just 21 years old. "We are deeply saddened," said Interim Chancellor of the University of Mississippi Larry Sparks in a statement to Today. Ellie was a valued member of our student community. Lafayette County investigator Jarrett Bundren told CBS on Saturday morning, a white female was found on the ground with multiple gunshot wounds to her back. "I'm working on this case and it's heartbreaking, the girl who was shot so many times." According to sources, a local resident walking their dog reported hearing gunshots early in the morning between approximately 2:15 and 2:30 a.m. Initiating an investigation, police immediately gained access to the rented apartment where Ellie Costiel lived. Although the victim's phone was missing, her Apple Watch was discovered in the room. Witness interviews revealed that a few days before the incident, Ellie's parents had visited her from St. Louis, and she had shared with them how eagerly she was looking forward to the start of the new academic year at the university and had no regrets about staying on campus for the summer. Data from the Apple Watch also showed that after a phone conversation with her mother, the young woman sent several messages to someone named Brandon Theisfeld. Upon examining the messages, detectives learned that 3 months prior to the incident, Ellie had shared shocking news with Brandon. Since Brandon was the last person known to have communicated with the victim, he became a subject of interest to the police. Further examination of their messages revealed that Ellie and Brandon had been in an on-and-off romantic relationship. Brandon Theisfeld, a tall, dark-haired young man with an athletic build, was also a student at the University of Mississippi. He hailed from Fort Worth, Texas, and was raised in a well-mannered family. In 2016, as a freshman, Ellie met Brandon and immediately fell for him. The young people started dating, but they never officially declared themselves as a couple. While Ellie's feelings for Brandon were sincere, he never demonstrated the seriousness of his intentions towards her. Ellie's friends reported that their relationship was not always smooth. They often argued, including in public. Ellie and Brandon would periodically break up, but then they would be seen together again after some time. On April 12, 2019, Ellie wrote to Brandon that she had taken a pregnancy test and the result was positive, but she received no reply from him. She bombarded him with text and voice messages, but her boyfriend ignored her. Exactly 3 months later, he finally responded, "I don't want a child at all. Seriously, it will ruin my life. I can't help you with this and I don't plan to. It's still very early. Just take a pill or make a doctor's appointment and deal with the issue." Ellie, deeply in love, desperately wanted to meet in person to discuss the situation, but Brandon continually refused. On the fateful Friday of July 19th, Ellie went to a local bar with her friends. At 11:52 p.m., surveillance cameras captured her leaving the bar. She got into a taxi and went home. About 30 minutes later, she received a call. It was Brandon. At 1:58 a.m. on July 20th, Ellie got into Teisfeld's car for her last ride. They headed to an abandoned fishing camp by Sardis Lake. According to police reports, the drive down the dark road to the location was supposed to take about 45 minutes. Witnesses reported clearly hearing gunshots in that area between 2:15 and 2:30 a.m. Investigators contacted Brandon Teisfeld on Sunday afternoon and asked him to come to the station to talk about Ellie Kostiel. He found some convincing reasons to avoid coming, but assured the detectives he would meet them on Monday at 8:30 a.m. on Monday, July 22, 2019. After Brandon Teisfeld failed to appear at the police station, investigators began to track his phone. Location data showed that Brandon was heading to his home in Fort Worth, Texas. Authorities issued a BOLO, be on the lookout, for his pickup, which had a distinctive license plate with TAC 3IT. They also alerted all nearby police stations, and the suspect was arrested when he stopped at a gas station in Memphis. 2 days later, 22-year-old Brandon Teisfeld was placed in a local jail and charged with homicide. Teisfeld's lawyer and father claimed he was innocent. As the Oxford community grappled with the violent loss of one of their own, Ellie Kostiel's death quickly captured the nation's attention. Reporters eager to learn more about the student and the person charged with her death flocked to Oxford from across the country. Brandon Teisfeld insisted on his innocence until the end, but the evidence against him was more than sufficient. During his arrest, a gun matching the caliber used in the shooting near the lake was found in his possession. His car contained stained clothing, later determined by forensic analysis to be bloodstains belonging to the victim. It was established that after July 12th, Brandon had left Oxford to go home to Texas to retrieve his father's gun, allowing the prosecution to argue that the act was premeditated. His internet search history contained queries such as abortion services and abortion pills. It was later found that each time he agreed to meet Ellie, he canceled at the last minute or failed to show up without explanation. His search history also included queries on how to avoid punishment for a crime, how to conceal a crime, and how to use a weapon. A letter addressed to his parents was discovered in Teisfeld's apartment stating, "I am not a good person. This is not your fault. Something in me just doesn't work. I've always had terrible thoughts. I've always had these feelings. I just felt out of place. I think this is the end for me. I'll either go to jail or die. I know I'll get caught." On August 30th, 2019, a grand jury charged Brandon Teisfeld with the life-taking of Alexandria Kostiel. Yet again, he refused to accept responsibility for the incident. Brandon faced the ultimate penalty, capital punishment. However, the trial was postponed due to the widely known restrictions in place at the time due to the COVID-19 pandemic. On August 27, 2021, when the process resumed, Brandon Teisfeld, advised by his lawyer, pleaded guilty to mitigate the potential punishment. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In his final statement, Brandon apologized to Ellie's parents. "My actions have forever changed your life, and the life of my family. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. I pray for God's forgiveness, and I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive me too," he said. Cindy Kostiel, Ellie's mother, did not accept Brandon's apology, stating that he should spend the rest of his life in prison and that every time his cell door slammed shut, he should remember the heinous act he committed. Investigator Jarrett Bundren eventually disclosed some already known facts about such a brazen crime to the public. He explained, Ellie had told Brandon she thought she was pregnant. Brandon didn't want her to keep the baby, and the couple had many arguments about it. Although Ellie wanted to meet in person to discuss the situation, Brandon refused to do so until the day of the incident. Intent on questioning Brandon, the police asked him to come to the station for some inquiries. However, the suspect seemed to resist and continued to make excuses for not being able to come in. Alarmed, the police began tracking his cell phone and realized that Brandon was heading to his home in Fort Worth, Texas. Immediately after locating Brandon, authorities alerted all police departments in the vicinity, and the suspect was arrested when he stopped to refuel at a gas station in Memphis. Upon his arrest, authorities found blood on him. Moreover, a pistol was found in his truck, the caliber of which matched the weapon used in Ellie's demise. Although Brandon insisted on his innocence and claimed he had no part in the incident, the police ultimately charged him with the crime. 5 days after Ellie's passing, normalcy had yet to return to Funky's bar, where surveillance cameras had captured her leaving shortly before midnight on July 19th. Interviews with witnesses, who were among the last to see Ellie, revealed that the management had recently installed a camera right in front of the bar. A bartender, who preferred to remain anonymous, mentioned she had been friends with Ellie since school. Taking a break from her duties, she found the words to describe her friend. She always smiled. She just lit up the room. She had a smile from ear to ear, she said. Ellie was the kind of person who greeted everyone. It's just really sad. She was too kind, she said, looking away as the colorful disco lights danced on her face. We're going to miss her. Ellie's teacher and friend, who taught the Introduction to Retail course, Morgan Hall, learned about the passing of her student the following Monday. She was shocked. You never expect something like this to happen in Oxford and its surroundings. During the interrogation, Morgan mentioned the last time she saw Ellie around 1:15 p.m. on July 19th, when she submitted her test. She left, and I think that evening everything went downhill, she said. Ellie was a sweet girl, very quiet, and I liked having her in class, Morgan stated. After hearing about the student's demise, Morgan immediately went to the administrators to figure out the best way to deal with the situation. According to her, the university had students involved in suicides and fatal accidents, but this was something new. Morgan Hall briefly mentioned Ellie's passing in class. Counselors were ready to assist and were available on campus during that period. Anyone who wanted to postpone their final exams for a few days could do so if they needed time to grieve. My heart goes out to her parents and all her friends, she said. Parents shouldn't have to bury their children. That's not how it's supposed to work. As it turned out, Ellie Kostiel, in her need for support, had told friends that she was pregnant with Brandon Theisfeld's child. Her sisters knew she was pregnant and that she had told Brandon, said a classmate. He was very upset about it, about how it would ruin his life and future. He was angry that she wouldn't have an abortion. She said, "No, I don't believe in that." Another friend mentioned Ellie tried to end her pregnancy through unhealthy methods, like long walks, drinking a lot, and using forbidden substances. She was 17 weeks along. She was struggling with it. Brandon knew about it, but he was seeing someone else. He wanted her to end the pregnancy. I think morally she didn't want to, said Ellie's close friends. He was terrible, and then she would break up with him. Or he would break up with her in anger, and then come back to her saying, I'm sorry. And she always took him back. Ellie Kostial's shocked friends and classmates struggled to cope with the news and paid tribute to their friend on social media. It's just hard for me because when I see her face, all I can think about is what she went through, what she thought, what she said her friend Anna Pasco. It's very, very difficult. On Twitter, one of Ellie's classmates wrote on July 23rd that for years, they had to listen to Ellie and discuss in detail the issues between her and Brandon. He pursued her for many years, using her for his own interests during that time. I spent countless nights holding Ellie. wiping her tears as she cried over this monster for many years, said the now deleted post. You deserve hell, a disgusting excuse for a person. Rex Ravita, a former dorm neighbor of Theisfeld's, shared in an interview that the 22-year-old was a daddy's boy, who said he had been seeing Ellie Kostial off and on for many years, just for the sake of not being bored. I genuinely believe he emotionally manipulated her into believing he loved her just as she did him, and I think he kept her on the hook until the very last second, said Ravita. Ole Miss student Rex Ravita, a former dorm neighbor of suspect Brandon Theisfeld, later described the alleged perpetrator as misogynistic and arrogant, stating, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He was very much a daddy's boy. Always had to mention his father's money, how his dad could get him out of anything. Just that kind of attitude all the time. Any vulgar comment he could make, any crude remark towards anyone in our dorm, he got away with. On Thursday evening in her hometown of St. Louis, a memorial service was held for Ellie Kostial. At the request of the Kostials, no public statements were made in Oxford about memorial events. Only black ribbons encircling the majestic white columns of the women's houses, including Alpha Phi where Ellie lived, served as a reminder of the tragedy. The young student's demise unsettled the entire state. Meikle Cunningham, a resident of Oxford, mentioned that the case has caught everyone's attention on campus. This is the biggest news in town since football season for a long time, said Cunningham. It's just terrible. He expressed hope that the case could be resolved soon, so the Kostial family could find peace. Despite the deliberate withholding of crucial facts for the sake of investigation confidentiality, some news agencies conducted thorough investigations and reported that surveillance cameras captured Kostial on film early Saturday morning, near the location where her body was found. They reported seeing Ellie Kostial with a man, who appears to be Theisfeld, at a 24-hour store in the Harmontown area. Arafat Najib, who has owned this store for about 10 years, mentioned that police officers came to the store on Sunday and asked to review the surveillance camera footage. Najib said that the investigators did not explain why they were there and took some evidence with them when they left. According to Najib, video footage is erased every 72 hours, so there's no way to go back and see what the cameras captured. The business owner stated, "We've never had any problems or violent incidents here. This is a small town. It's quiet. Everyone knows each other. This is just madness." The Lafayette County Sheriff's Office long refused to release any additional information about the progress of the investigation or to give interviews to the media. Rocky Kennedy, the Lafayette County coroner, mentioned that there's a reason officials are not saying much. This isn't a story that everyone will see until it reaches court, he said. Certain delicate details in this case are tools to ensure that the person who committed this act is brought before court, convicted, serves the appropriate sentence, and is held accountable for what they've done. Kennedy said the media attention on this case has been overwhelming, but it doesn't change the nature of his work. Every case I handle is important, said the coroner. I try to give the same attention to every family who's lost someone. They've lost someone they loved. Michelle Miller, also involved in investigating Ellie Kostial's case, raised questions about missed warning signs in relationships and whether her demise could have been prevented. Brandon Theisfeld was charged with the crime. He faced the death penalty after being accused of Ellie Kostial's demise and alleged abduction. Despite delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, justice was served. Eventually, in August 2021, he pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received a life sentence. Judge Kelly Luther sentenced him to life imprisonment, and he will have the possibility of parole when he turns 65. Brandon Theisfeld is currently incarcerated in the Mississippi State Penitentiary in Sunflower County, Mississippi. At the trial, when the verdict was read, Brandon Theisfeld showed some emotions and sincerely admitted to his involvement in the demise of Ellie Kostial. He acknowledged his guilt in the demise of Alexandria Kostial and was very emotional when he apologized to both her family and his own. A significant fact in this case was the finding of the forensic examination, which established that Alexandria Kostial had never been pregnant. We are left to speculate and ponder why a young and promising student at a popular university, who could have had a happy and fulfilling life, fabricated the existence of a non-existent child and spoke about it to all her friends for 3 months. It seems she sincerely believed in it and thought that this news would melt Brandon's heart and make it belong only to her. Unfortunately, a miracle did not occur. Her parents and friends are still mourning their dear Ellie.